Imagine a machine that can write novels, compose symphonies, or even, I don't know, paint stunning masterpieces.
It's pretty incredible stuff.
But now, picture a really heated debate, not just over who owns those creations, but what sensitive data those machines were trained on.
Right, and whether you can even trust what they produce as fact.
Exactly. This isn't science fiction anymore. It's the very real, very complex challenge of generative AI right now. And it's reshaping our legal systems and society as we speak.
It truly is a fascinating frontier, blurring lines that used to seem incredibly clear-cut.
Totally. So today we're taking a deep dive into the cutting edge of generative AI. We're exploring its profound impact on copyright law, the media industry.
And we'll do a bit of a comparative look, too, right, between the EU and the US.
Yeah, exactly. How these two major players are grappling with these, honestly, monumental challenges.
Our mission, really, is to unpack the most crucial legal and ethical puzzles around AI-generated content, from the vast amounts of data it eats up as input.
Either the stuff it spits out as output.
And, of course, the bigger societal ripple effects.
We'll explore the philosophical roots, the current legal framework, some real-world examples, so you can walk away feeling well-informed about one of the, most debated topics of our time. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So before we even get to who owns what an AI creates, there's this more fundamental, almost philosophical question that seems to underpin everything. Can an artificial intelligence system aptly be considered a legal person?
Yeah.
What's the biggest hurdle there?
That really is the starting point, because this concept of personhood, it has a surprisingly long and evolving history.
Right.
I mean, you go back to early Roman ideas, this universitas idea, grouping entities together. Then the church in the Middle Ages added layers like moral agency.
And philosophers really wrestled with this, didn't they? Like Leibniz connecting it to rights and individuality.
Exactly. Leibniz emphasized that capacity to retain and fulfill rights. And later, you get Kant and Hegel linking personhood to dignity, freedom, social recognition.
All very human concepts.
Very human. And then in the 19th century, the German legal scholar Savigny, he famously viewed legal personhood as something deeply embedded in the social, historical, cultural fabric of a community.
Okay.
For him, only humans, with their free choice, their cognition, were actual persons in the natural sense. Everything else was sort of an extension, legally constructed.
So if it's that complicated for humans, how do artificial entities like corporations even manage to get legal personhood? That always seemed a bit abstract to me.
Yeah, it's a very specific, complex process. It requires what's called a material substrate, a real-world foundation. Meaning you need actual people involved, you need assets, money, a clear purpose, and then it needs formal recognition by the government.
Okay. Like registering a company.
Precisely. Through things like the Registro Mercantil in Spain or state procedures in the U.S., it's not just an idea. It's a formally established entity with rules and structures.
That makes sense for a corporation. But AI still feels different. From a moral standpoint, what makes granting AI legal personhood so tricky?
Well, the core issue is its lack of, human characteristics and feelings. There are fundamental problems, definitional, epistemological, ethical ones.
How so?
Like if you define morality based purely on rationality, as someone like Kant did, well, that excludes non-human animals.
Yep.
And by extension, AI.
Right.
And our inability to even define, let alone perceive, if an AI could truly experience suffering or pain. I mean, that raises enormous ethical red flags if we were to try and create a sentient, suffering AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole accountability mess. If an AI does something wrong, who's actually responsible?
Exactly. Because these systems involve so many layers, the code, the data, how people use them in society, accountability gets incredibly complex.
It's not like pointing to one person.
Not at all. Traditional accountability needs a clear authority, a way to interrogate actions in some external forum, a limit on power. The whole accountability architecture for AI actually involves like 7 features: context, range, agent, forum, to whom, and for what.
Wow, okay. That's a lot to untangle. So the goals for AI accountability could be anything from just ensuring compliance to, I guess, fostering legitimacy?
Precisely. Preventing harm, encouraging responsiveness. And you see this reflected in risk allocation models, too. Like Unity, where the AI is just part of the owner's platform, versus partial separation, where maybe an AI controls a business with its own distinct assets. These highlight different levels of potential liability.
So what does this all mean for us now? Is there a pragmatic solution actually on the table, or are we just stuck in this philosophical debate?
Well, many scholars suggest the most pragmatic path, for now at least, is to view AI as a source of responsibility for other agents, typically humans.
Ah, like how you're responsible for your kids or your pet or employees?
Kind of, yeah, it's similar. The key insight really is that legal systems are trying to adapt by bypassing the hardest philosophical questions for now. They're prioritizing actionable accountability by grounding responsibility firmly in that human chain of command.
Okay, so the debate over AI's legal personality is far from settled, and it clearly impacts responsibility and ownership. But that's just step one,
Right.
because that leads us straight into the next thorny issue. If the AI does create something, who owns that?
And that brings us to something equally contentious. The copyrightability of AI-generated content, the output problem, as you called it.
Yeah. Traditionally, copyright needs originality and significant human creative input. AI just blows that up, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Take the European Union. They define a work as an intellectual human creation.
Human creation, key words.
It needs two things: originality and a tangible form of expression. And the Court of Justice of the EU, the CJEU, has been very clear, like in the Painter case, that copyright protection hinges on the author's free creative choices.
Meaning it's really for human creators, not, say, the company that made the AI.
Primarily, yes, not legal entities like publishers or AI companies themselves, but the human author making those choices.
So what if a human uses AI like a tool, like a really advanced paintbrush or camera? Is that still copyrightable in the EU?
Generally, yes. If a human uses AI as a tool, the work can be copyrightable. The key is whether the human made enough free and creative decisions during the whole process: conception, execution, editing.
So if there's enough human stamp on it?
Exactly. If that human input makes the work unique, reflects their personality or choices, it's generally protected.
Okay. But what about the other scenario? AI that just creates on its own. Minimal human input beyond maybe the initial prompt.
Those are the AI autonomous outputs. And the majority view among scholars in the EU is that these are essentially authorless works, and therefore
Nice.
not copyrightable. There's just not enough human creative intervention in the production process itself.
Okay, so that's the EU. How does the American approach compare? Is the U.S. Copyright Office thinking along similar lines?
Pretty similar, actually. In the U.S., copyright law Title 17, Section 102A protects original works of authorship fixed in any tangible medium.
Original works of authorship.
Key phrase again. And the U.S. Copyright Office, the USCO, has been very firm. In their 2021 compendium, their 2023 policy statement, they've basically declared human authorship as the sine qua non,
The essential condition.
the absolute must-have. If there's no human author involved in the creative process, there's no copyright. Full stop.
And didn't we see a big case related to this, but for patents? The Thaler case.
Indeed. The 2023 Thaler v. Perlmutter case upheld rulings that AI-generated inventions cannot be patented without a human inventor. It really aligns with this emphasis on human creativity across intellectual property.
So just to be clear, in the U.S., if I use AI to help me write an article, maybe flesh out ideas, that might be copyrightable.
It might, yes, if your creative input, your authorship, is clearly evident.
But if an AI just writes a novel entirely from a prompt, that's currently not getting copyright protection.
That's the current stance. AI autonomous outputs are not afforded copyright protection in the U.S. because there seem to be no human creative space in their production.
Okay. But is there any other kind of protection being discussed for these authorless works? I think I've heard about neighboring rights. What are those?
Yeah, it's a debate some are having. Neighboring rights, or related rights, typically protect performers, phonogram producers, broadcasters, think sound recordings, broadcasts under international treaties like BERM, Rome, WIPO.
So the idea is, could those apply to AI stuff?
That's the question being floated. Could they protect authors' AI-generated content?
What are the hurdles there? Sounds like a bit of a stretch.
It is tricky. I mean, the core insight here is that neighboring rights were designed to protect the investment and effort of human intermediaries, performers putting their interpretation on a song, producers investing in a recording.
Right, not necessarily the original composition itself.
Exactly. So applying them to AI where the effort isn't human and the investment is arguably in the tool, not the specific creation, it really stretches the purpose of those rights.
Plus other issues.
Plus, yeah, there's a lack of international agreement on how these rights work even normally, let alone for AI. And you have to ask, Is protection even justified given the decrease in cost of AI output? Do AI users even need that kind of incentive? These rights don't usually have an originality threshold like copyright does.
Okay, so it really boils down to human involvement, doesn't it?
Mhm.
If you're using AI as a tool, making creative choices, you might own the copyright.
That's the general direction, yes.
But if the AI is truly creating autonomously, it's a different story, at least for now.
Right.
But, while human input seems key for copyrighting the outputs, that's only half the picture. The other side, the input problem, about how these AIs are trained, that's where another huge legal battle is brewing.
Oh, absolutely. The input problem, copyright infringement during AI training, is equally, if not more, complex.
Because these models, especially large language models like ChatGPT, need absolutely insane amounts of data to learn, right?
Massive amounts. And this often involves copying text, images, audio, which directly raises the question of copyright infringement on a potentially unprecedented scale.
It's like, okay, you need all this material to make the AI smart, but where did it come from? And did you have permission? How's Europe handling this data dilemma?
The EU tackled this head-on with its DSM directive in 2019. It introduced specific exceptions for text and data mining, or TDM.
TDM exception.
Yeah, Articles 3 and 4. They basically allow researchers and commercial organizations to reproduce and extract copyrighted works for the purpose of data mining, provided they have lawful access to the work in the first place.
Okay, but there's a catch.
There is. The crucial part is that rights holders must not have expressly reserved their rights against TDM, for example, through a machine-readable opt-out signal on their website.
That sounds reasonable on paper. Put up a sign saying, don't scrape my stuff.
Yeah.
But are there practical problems with that?
Oh, big time. Authors, legal scholars, they've raised serious concerns. How can anyone consistently check adherence to these opt-outs across the entire internet? It's practically impossible.
And what about paying creators? If a model like ChatGPT is trained on billions of works, how do you even figure out fair payment?
Exactly. Splitting any potential compensation could mean creators get, literal pennies on the dollar, if anything. Plus, there's no universal database of protected works, intellectual property rights are fragmented across different countries.
So it gets messy fast.
Very messy. And the EU AI Act, while important, leaves a lot of room for contractual flexibility, which could actually lead to more fragmentation as different countries implement it differently.
Okay, so not a perfect fix yet in the EU.
Yeah.
Now let's hop across the pond. The American approach often relies on the fair use doctrine, right?
That's the main tool, yes. The U.S. relies heavily on fair use, which permits certain uses of copyrighted works that would otherwise be illegal infringement.
It's been around a while.
Since an 1841 ruling, Folsom v. Marsh, actually, it was later codified in the Copyright Act, Title 17, Section 107. Fair use allows limited use for things like commentary, criticism, news reporting, research, teaching.
And how do courts decide if training an AI counts as fair use? That seems like a huge leap from, say, quoting a book in a review.
It is. They look at 4 key factors. 1, the purpose and character of the use. Is it commercial? Is it transformative?
Transformative meaning.
Meaning, does the new work add something new, change the purpose or character of the original? AI developers really lean on this, arguing training is transformative.
Big factor 2.
2, the nature of the copyrighted work itself. Is it factual or creative? 3, the amount and substantiality of the portion used. Did they copy the whole thing or just a bit?
And 4.
4, the effect of the use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work. Does the AI substitute for the original?
And AI developers argue training is transformative, like the Google Books case where scanning books for a search engine was okay.
Exactly. They argue the AI isn't creating a direct substitute for the original works it learned from, but something entirely new.
This sounds exactly like the arguments in that huge New York Times versus Microsoft and OpenAI lawsuit that dropped late last year.
Precisely. That case is a major test. The New York Times filed in December 2023, claiming these AI tools infringe their copyright on a massive scale.
But not just copying, right? They had other claims, too.
Yeah, they argued the AI diverts internet traffic away from their site, causing financial loss from ads, licensing, subscriptions, and they also alleged hallucination.
Where the AI makes stuff up but attributes it to the Times.
Exactly, wrongly attributing false content to them, damaging their reputation.
And what are OpenAI and Microsoft arguing back?
They're hitting all the fair use points, especially transformation. They also argue the training process is non-consumptive.
Non-consumptive. What does that mean here?
It means, they argue, that the AI isn't creating copies for humans to read or view instead of the original articles. The AI is just learning from the data internally.
Like reading a library to get smarter. not photocopying the books.
Kind of. They argue it's about learning patterns, not storing or reproducing the content for users. And they also argue copyright doesn't give the owner absolute control over all uses, especially internal learning uses.
This really gets to the heart of the copying debate, though. Critics say, look, even if the AI doesn't spit out verbatim copies later, the act of copying all that data for training is itself infringement.
Right. They compare it to, say, compressing a movie file or meticulously recreating it frame by frame. Even if the end product looks different, the initial copying happened.
But the AI developers have a counter to that.
They do. They argue these models are incredibly complex compression algorithms, not literal databases holding copies. Their internal workings, the weights and parameters, aren't copies in the traditional legal sense. It's more akin, they argue, to how a human learns and synthesizes information from many sources.
That's a fascinating technical argument meeting a legal one.
Absolutely. And it gets even more complex with music.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the music industry has very specific, layered rights and licensing rules that don't always map neatly onto text or images. Think about compulsory mechanical licenses just to record a cover of a song.
Right. You have to pay for the underlying composition.
Exactly. So when AI learns from music, it potentially implicates both the sound recording rights and the underlying composition rights, often held by different parties. It's a unique legal minefield.
One thing creators are really pushing for is transparency. They want to know what data these models were trained on. Is citing sources even technically possible with these massive data sets?
It seems to be. There are projects emerging, like Olmostack and Olmatrace, which are actively working on tracking and accounting for training data provenance.
So it can be done.
It demonstrates that technically more transparency about the input sources is feasible, and that could be a really crucial step in resolving some of these input disputes.
It really highlights this fundamental tension, doesn't it? Is AI training this amazing transformative use that benefits society, or is it just a massive unauthorized copying operation?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question the courts are grappling with right now.
And the outcome could genuinely reshape entire industries.
No question about it.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the real-world impact right now. Generative AI is already deeply embedded in the media industry, isn't it? This whole idea of robotic journalism or algorithmic journalism.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a future concept. It's been happening for a while, since maybe 2010, even earlier, with things like The Guardian using software for sports statistics. Algorithms can automate parts of the news production process, from data collection right through to publication.
And the public seems pretty aware of this now.
Increasingly so. A Reuters report found that I think 72% of people across 6 countries had heard of Gen AI tools.
Wow.
Yeah, and significant numbers believe journalists are already using AI frequently for things like data analysis, maybe 40%, translation around 43%, even basic spelling and grammar checks.
And reversioning content, too, like
Yeah.
changing formats.
Right. Around 30% thought journalists used it often for things like generating headlines, finding stock photos, or turning text into audio or video summaries.
We've seen concrete examples, too, like CNET Money using AI for financial advice articles.
Exactly. Early 2023, they published AI-assisted financial advice. They were explicit about the AI assistance, but also emphasized, crucially, that there was human editorial review and fact-checking involved.
So beyond just automating news writing, what are some other benefits AI is bringing or promising for the media landscape?
Well, content automation is the obvious one, but it also allows for increased personalization of the user experience, tailoring news feeds, recommendations.
Right.
It can even potentially help reduce toxicity in online comment sections by moderating or filtering. And it influences content strategy, too, using user engagement data to figure out what resonates.
Okay, but now for the flip side, the dark side. This is where the risks seem really, really palpable. Misinformation, deepfakes. It feels like maybe the biggest threat.
It is a critical concern, absolutely. These generative models can now instantly create incredibly realistic multimedia content texts, photos, audio, video that completely blurs the line between what's real and what's fake.
It makes it so hard to trust anything you see or hear online.
And it's not just about convincing fakes, it's also about the inherent bias problem, right?
Yeah, Kaplan that.
Bias that's baked into the massive training data sets can lead the AI-generated content itself to produce unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
And that feeds into...
It directly contributes to the creation of sophisticated deepfakes and allows for the incredibly rapid spread of both misinformation, unintentionally false stuff, and disinformation, deliberately deceptive content.
The societal implications there are just profound.
Right.
We're talking about potentially eroding trust in all information sources, manipulating public opinion on a massive scale.
Even undermining democratic processes, elections, public health crises, the potential for disruption is huge.
It's a massive threat to the fabric of society, really.
That's truly the risk at the heart of it all.
So while AI offers this immense potential for media, its power to generate convincing fakes and biased content poses this significant threat to information integrity. It's just getting harder than ever to distinguish fact from fiction. What are we actually doing about it? What countermeasures are being used right now?
Well, there are efforts being deployed at different levels. You've got the user level, the platform level, and the government level.
Okay, start with users. What can individuals do?
Individuals can try to self-verify content, using fact-checking websites, being cautious about forwarding unverified stuff. But honestly, human psychology, cognitive limits, the sheer volume.
Yeah, and the lack of easy tools within apps.
Exactly. It limits the effectiveness significantly. People are busy. Things look real.
So what about the platforms themselves? Facebook, X, TikTok, they must be doing something.
They are. They employ content moderation systems, often a mix of AI and human reviewers. But that introduces its own problems, potential human biases and moderation mistakes, scale issues.
And they don't always want the responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
Well, some platforms explicitly disclaim accountability for content restriction beyond maybe user privacy standards. It's a very tricky area legally and ethically for them.
Okay, and government efforts. Are they stepping up effectively?
National governments have certainly attempted initiatives, but they face huge challenges. Identifying offenders, especially with fake profiles, is tough. Aggressively monitoring across countless platforms is practically impossible.
Resources too, I imagine.
Definitely. Cybersecurity units are often understaffed, undertrained for this specific threat, and there's often a lack of public awareness about the relevant laws or what constitutes illegal content. It's a really complex web.
So it sounds like a pretty fragmented, maybe not super effective effort overall. What would a truly effective, coordinated solution look like?
Yeah, what's needed is a much more collaborative, multifaceted approach. People talk about an integrated defense framework, meaning combining technological solutions, better detection tools, with strategic approaches, clear policy and regulation, and importantly, educational initiatives.
So tech, strategy, policy, education, all working together.
Exactly. Developing clear rules about producing and spreading deepfakes, but also launching broad educational campaigns to boost media literacy and critical thinking skills across the population, helping people spot fakes.
What are the biggest hurdles to actually putting a framework like that in place? It sounds great, but ambitious?
It is ambitious. The challenges include getting adequate resource allocation, actually engaging all the different stakeholders, tech companies, governments, educators, media, the public, which is never simple.
And the tech keeps changing.
Constantly. You have to adapt rapidly, and there's always the risk of going too far over censorship, stifling legitimate expression or innovation. It's a fine line.
So the goals are clear, though. Better detection, a coherent strategy.
Right. Technological effectiveness, strategic coherence, policy impact, ideally through international collaboration on laws, and measurable educational outcomes strengthening the public's ability to differentiate information.
This clearly isn't a problem any single group can solve alone. It screams for interdisciplinary collaboration and, frankly, serious investment.
Absolutely. It requires computer scientists, legal experts, academics, the media industry, governments, civil society, everyone working together. It's an all-hands-on-deck situation.
And we see differences in how that investment is happening, say, between the U.S. and Europe.
We do. While the U.S. tends to have higher private investment in AI, I think OpenAI, Anthropic, fueled by venture capital, Cambridge, the EU is actually leading in public investment.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Programs like the Digital Europe program, for instance, it's committing something like $2.1 billion specifically for AI research and investment between 2021 and 2027. Plus, initiatives like Invest EU, Horizon Europe, they're putting serious public money behind building European AI capacity.
Are there specific research initiatives focused on these media and ethics issues that stand out?
Definitely. A great example is AI for Media. It's a European center of excellence focused specifically on AI and media.
What do they do?
Their goal is to advance foundational AI research relevant to the media industry and society. They focus on trustworthy AI, things like robustness, explainability, fairness, privacy, also content-centered AI generating and analyzing multimedia. And human society-centered AI studying online discussions, disinformation, social media impacts.
Sounds comprehensive.
Yeah.
Any other examples, maybe more nationally focused?
Sure. There's a project called Fair Media in Austria running at Vienna University since late 2023. It's focused specifically on promoting ethical and responsible AI in media practice.
What are their goals?
Things like ensuring GDPR-compliant data sharing for training, giving media corporations more local control over model training, creating tools for post hoc explanation, basically, making AI decisions more transparent after the fact.
Practical tools for journalists.
Exactly. They're working on use cases like content classification, question answering systems for content verification, always emphasizing collaboration with journalists in the development process.
Okay, so if you connect all these dots, it's crystal clear that AI's impact is just too vast for any one discipline or company or government to handle alone.
Absolutely.
The only way forward seems to be this concerted, global, interdisciplinary effort to build AI systems that aren't just powerful, but are also, ethical and trustworthy.
That really sums it up. It has to be a collective effort.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've navigated this really intricate landscape of generative AI, from that deep question of legal personhood to the complex fights over copyright for both the inputs, the training data, and the outputs that generated content.
Right.
And finally, looking at its dual role in media. Revolutionizing things, yes, but also posing these huge threats through misinformation and bias.
And, the rise of AI really forces us to reconsider some deeply held human concepts: creativity, authorship, truth, accountability. What do these even mean anymore in this context?
That leads perfectly to the final thought I wanted to leave everyone with. Here it is. As AI continues to evolve at this breakneck speed, can our legal frameworks, our societal norms, actually adapt quickly enough?
Or are we just destined to perpetually play catch-up in this new digital frontier?
It's a huge question.
It's a question that is absolutely going to continue shaping our world in profound ways.
Well, we hope this deep dive has given you a clear understanding of these critical issues, maybe provided some insights that go a bit beyond the daily headlines.
Hopefully shedding some light on a complex topic.